My name is Nancy, and I'm 64 years old. I suppose you could say I'm the quiet type. I never asked for attention. I'd spent most of my life just going through the motions, one day after another, taking care of what needed taking care of. I was never the kind of woman to demand much. I was content with small pleasures, like a quiet evening in the garden with a cup of coffee, or the soft hum of the house as I dusted the shelves, making sure nothing was out of place. My husband, Robert, was different. He was the one with the big ideas, the one who dreamed of more. He always had plans, always saw potential in things that I couldn't quite understand, but he was good at convincing me. Together, we built this house. Stone by stone, brick by brick, we crafted it with our hands. I'd pick out the colors for the walls, and he'd make sure the foundation was solid. We worked together for years, creating a home we could both be proud of. When Robert passed away, it felt like the world had shifted underneath my feet. He had been my anchor, the one who had always been there. After his death, I was left alone in this house. It wasn't the same without him. The house felt too big, too empty. And though I had my garden to tend to and my quiet little routines to keep me company, there was a silence now, a gap where his laughter and presence used to be. I kept going, though. I always did. It wasn't until a few years later that things began to change again, in ways I hadn't expected. It was a phone call that started it. My son Ethan called one afternoon. He and his wife Mia had been living in a small apartment in the city. Things had been tough, they said. Both of them had lost their jobs, and finding a new one in the city had proved more difficult than they anticipated. Ethan told me they were thinking of renting out their apartment and would like to stay with me for a little while, just until they got back on their feet. I was used to them coming and going. It wasn't unusual for them to need a place to stay now and then. I said yes, of course. I always said yes. I was their mother, and mothers always open their doors when their children need them, don't they? I told myself that it would only be temporary. After all, they were both young, ambitious, and smart. Surely they'd find a place of their own soon enough. I didn't mind the thought of having them stay with me. The house felt so empty sometimes, and maybe their presence would fill it with life again. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it would be a short-term thing, like all the other times before. But this time was different. When they arrived, it wasn't the warm reunion I had imagined. Ethan was quiet, distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. Mia, on the other hand, immediately took charge. She began rearranging things in the living room, changing the layout of the furniture. At first, I thought nothing of it. She was just trying to make herself comfortable, I reasoned. It was her home, too, for now. But then it started to feel different. One morning, I woke up to find the kitchen completely rearranged. The old wooden table that Robert had built was moved to the corner, and in its place was a shiny new breakfast nook. It felt strange, seeing my beloved kitchen altered in such a way. I'd spent years here, cooking for my family, creating traditions in this very space. Now it was like someone else's kitchen, a stranger's kitchen. "Don't worry, Mom," Ethan said when I hesitated. "We just thought it'd be better like this, more space for us." I forced a smile and nodded, trying to suppress the discomfort that was building inside me. But it didn't stop there. Soon Mia was throwing out my jars of spices, the ones I'd collected over the years from all the places Robert and I had traveled. "We'll organize it better," she said. "A new way of doing things." A new way? I hadn't even realized the old way needed changing. One evening, I overheard Mia talking to Ethan in the next room. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices were raised enough for me to catch the conversation. "Your mother is still here," she said, her tone tight with something I couldn't place. "It's not going to be forever, right?" Ethan's voice was calm, almost too calm. "Get used to it. This is your home now. We'll figure it out. I sat frozen in my chair, my heart thudding in my chest. This is your home now. I hadn't realized it then, but those words marked the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. My son, my own flesh and blood, was telling me that the house I had built with Robert, the house I had lived in for over 40 years, was no longer mine. And I couldn't shake the feeling that my presence there was becoming less and less welcome. The days that followed were filled with more subtle invasions. They stopped asking me what I wanted for dinner. Instead, they made their own plans, bought their own groceries. It was small at first, these little changes, but with every shift, I felt more like a guest in my own home. One day, I walked down the hallway to find a new family photo hanging on the wall. It wasn't our family. It was Mia's family, a photo from some vacation I hadn't been a part of. I stood there for a moment, staring at the smiling faces, feeling a lump form in my throat. They had already replaced me in their lives. Later that evening, I quietly walked past the photo, my fingers brushing against the frame. I took it off the wall and slipped it into a drawer, out of sight. It was an act of defiance, though I don't think they ever noticed. But I noticed, and I could feel the walls closing in around me. I spent the next few days in silence, retreating to the comfort of my own thoughts. But one thing was certain, things had changed. I had given them a place in my home, but in return, they had taken far more than I was willing to give. My kitchen was no longer my own. My house was no longer my home. And I felt like a stranger in the life I had built. I knew deep down that something had to be done, but I wasn't sure what. Not yet. But I would find a way. I always did. The days blurred into one another. I went through the motions, making my coffee in the morning, tending to the garden, and sitting by the window in the evenings, staring out at the street as the world moved on without me. It was as if I was a spectator in my own life. The house felt different now. It wasn't just the way things had been rearranged, though that alone made the place feel foreign. It was something more insidious, a quiet, creeping shift in the atmosphere, like a tide pulling everything away from me, piece by piece. The first change had been subtle. Mia began rearranging the furniture in the kitchen. At first, I thought she was just trying to make herself comfortable, trying to create a little space for herself in this house. But then it became clear that it wasn't just about comfort, it was about ownership. The counters, once filled with the jars of spices I had carefully collected over the years, spices from trips to Italy, Morocco, and the farmer's market down the street, were cleared away. Mia replaced my old jars with new sleek containers, all in matching sets. She even threw away some of my old cookbooks. I couldn't quite understand it. This was my kitchen, my space, but it no longer felt that way. One afternoon, as I was putting away some laundry, I overheard her talking to Ethan in the other room. It was an innocent enough conversation at first. They were talking about the groceries for dinner. But then Mia's voice turned sharp, and I caught the edge of something cold in her words. "Your mother is still here," she said, as though it were something to be tolerated rather than embraced. "It's fine for now, but we can't have this forever. I'm getting tired of living like this." Ethan's reply was just as unsettling. "Get used to it, Mia. This is your home now. We'll figure out the details later." It wasn't the words themselves, but the way he said them, like he had made up his mind, like my presence in the house was a temporary inconvenience. And suddenly, I realized it wasn't just the kitchen, it was the entire house. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself that I was being paranoid. Maybe it was nothing, but the feeling wouldn't go away. They were slowly taking over. Mia's influence spread beyond just the kitchen. Little by little, she started changing things that had always been mine. She replaced the old curtains I'd sewn by hand with something new, something more modern. The cushions on the couch? gone, replaced by a set of sleek designer ones that didn't match the style of the room at all. I remember walking into the living room one afternoon, only to find the bookshelf had been rearranged. The family photos that used to line the shelves were now buried behind her new, pristine books. Books I hadn't chosen, books I had no interest in. I stood there, staring at the shelf, trying to comprehend what was happening. My memories, my life, were being displaced. It wasn't just the physical changes either. There was something deeper happening. The respect that had once been a given, the quiet acknowledgement of my role in the family, had evaporated. My opinions seemed irrelevant. Mia would make decisions without consulting me. She'd choose the meals, rearrange the furniture, make plans with Ethan without asking for my input. And then there were the guests. At first, they didn't have visitors over often, but soon enough, they began inviting people over without warning. One afternoon, as I was in the garden, I came inside to find several strangers sitting at my dining table, laughing and chatting like they belonged here. Ethan and Mia barely acknowledged me as I walked past. They didn't need to ask my permission anymore. This was their home, after all. I felt like an outsider in my own house. It was during one of these gatherings that I overheard another conversation. One I wish I hadn't. Mia was sitting at the kitchen table, talking to a friend on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice was loud enough that I couldn't help but hear every word. "We'll take care of everything soon. She hardly even bothers anymore," she said, laughing lightly. My heart sank. The way she spoke about me, like I was some kind of nuisance to be dealt with, made my blood run cold. It wasn't just the kitchen anymore. It was my entire life, my existence, being reduced to something insignificant. That was when I realized they weren't just being disrespectful. They had a plan to push me out, to make me disappear, to erase me from the house and from their lives. I spent the next few days in a quiet fury, trying to process what was happening. My son, the one I had raised, was letting this happen. He was allowing Mia to treat me like this, as though I didn't matter. Every day I felt more invisible. It was like I didn't even exist to them. But I was not invisible. I may have been quiet, but I was still here. I had a right to my own home. I wasn't going to let them take that from me without a fight. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, my hands resting on the cool surface of the wood, staring at the empty jar of cinnamon that used to sit on the counter. It had been one of Robert's favorite spices. I would use it to make his favorite cinnamon pies, the ones he always begged for during the holidays. I was tired. Tired of being ignored. Tired of being pushed aside. I wasn't going to stand for it anymore. It was time to do something. The question was, what? The next few weeks dragged on like a slow, unbearable river, each day more oppressive than the last. I had always prided myself on being self-sufficient, strong, independent, but now I felt as if I were shrinking into myself, becoming a ghost in my own home. Every time I walked into a room, I was reminded of how things had changed, how they had changed me. It wasn't just the furniture, the decor, or the way the house now smelled differently. It was the way they treated me, or rather, the way they didn't treat me anymore. I had become invisible. It started with the meals. When I'd lived here with Robert, every meal was a shared experience. Even after he passed, I would prepare meals and set the table, just like we had always done. My son, Ethan, would come over and we'd sit together, talk about life, about work, about anything. We still had a connection, but now it was different. Mia would make dinner without consulting me, often preparing dishes I didn't care for or that I couldn't eat. I would stand by the kitchen door, watching her move around the kitchen. My old space, the one I had filled with memories, now reduced to a stage for her to perform on. At first, I asked if I could help, but my offers were always met with a short, "No, it's fine, Mom." It wasn't out of kindness, it was dismissive, like I wasn't needed, like I wasn't wanted in my own kitchen. Dinner would be served, and I was invited to sit at the table, but there was no longer any effort to include me in the conversation. Mia and Ethan would talk to each other like I wasn't there. They'd laugh, share inside jokes, make plans for the weekend, plans that didn't involve me. I became a shadow at my own table, quietly eating my meal, my heart growing heavier with every moment I spent in silence. The worst part was the family photos. I don't know when it happened exactly, but one day I noticed they were gone. The photos of Robert and me, of Ethan when he was young, of all the memories we had made together as a family. They were no longer displayed on the hallway wall. Instead, the wall had been transformed. There were new pictures, pictures of Mia and Ethan, their friends, a few of their vacations, but not a single photo of me. I didn't even exist in their world anymore. It was like they were erasing me, removing me from the narrative of this house, as though I had never mattered. I tried to talk to Ethan about it. I tried to bring it up casually at first. "I noticed there's no family photo on the wall anymore," I said, trying to sound casual. He didn't even look up from his phone. "Yeah, we thought it would look better without all the clutter," he said, his voice indifferent. Without all the clutter. My clutter. My memories. I didn't say anything after that. I didn't have the energy to argue, not when I already felt like I was fading into the background of their lives. One night, I went into the living room, planning to read for a while. It was late, and I was exhausted from another long day of feeling invisible. But when I entered, I was taken aback. Mia and Ethan were sitting on the couch, laughing, their legs tangled together, and there, sitting on the coffee table in front of them, was a new family photo, the two of them arm in arm with big smiles on their faces. I stood there in the doorway, feeling the sting of rejection wash over me. It was like a slap in the face, so casual, so thoughtless, like they hadn't even considered how I might feel. I could hear them laughing, but their laughter felt hollow, distant. I didn't belong here anymore. I turned and walked away, my throat tight, my eyes stinging with the threat of tears. But I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the attic, dusting off old boxes of things Robert and I had kept. There were letters, pictures, mementos from our life together, all of it stacked in piles, carefully preserved, each piece a part of who we had been. But as I sifted through the old memories, it became clear I wasn't just losing my place in the house, I was losing my place in my own life. I hadn't even noticed it happening. It wasn't just the photos on the wall or the jars of spices replaced in the kitchen. It was the subtle erosion of my own identity, my own significance. The years of hard work, the sacrifices I had made, all of it was slipping away. I had been replaced quietly, with no fanfare. No one had asked me if I was okay with any of it. It was just assumed that I would accept it, like I had to fade into the background of their life, like I had no say in the matter. The final straw came one evening when I overheard Ethan and Mia talking in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to listen, but their voices carried through the walls. They didn't seem to care that I was in the other room. "She doesn't bother us anymore," Mia was saying, her voice sweet but cold. "She stays out of the way. I think she's finally accepted that we're in charge here." Ethan laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Yeah, she'll get used to it. She doesn't have a choice." I stood frozen in place, the weight of their words sinking in. My son, my own flesh and blood, had decided that I no longer had a place in this house, that I no longer had a voice. It was as if they were taking everything from me, piece by piece, and I was powerless to stop it. I had been nothing more than a guest in my own home for far too long. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling. I had been living under the illusion that things would get better, that they would remember who I was, that they would care. But that was just a fantasy. It was clear now that they had no intention of letting me be a part of their lives anymore. But one thing was clear to me, too. I wasn't going to let them erase me, not without a fight. The sun was setting as I pulled into the parking lot of the law office. It was a small, unassuming building, nestled on the corner of a busy street, but it felt like a beacon to me. This was where I was going to take control of my life again. I had been passive for too long, hoping things would fix themselves. But it was clear now, nothing was going to change unless I made it happen. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car, trying to steady my nerves. I had made the call earlier that day, and I'd been lucky enough to get an appointment on such short notice. The lawyer I spoke to had been kind, but there was an edge in her voice, a professionalism that reminded me this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. When I walked into the office, the air was cool and the faint smell of paper and coffee lingered. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses perched on her nose, smiled and directed me to a small conference room where the lawyer would meet with me. I felt a tightness in my chest, my pulse quickening. The door opened and a woman in her early 40s entered. Her dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her eyes were sharp, scanning me with a kind of quiet authority. She extended her hand, and I shook it, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Lauren. Please sit down. I'm glad you came in today," she said, her voice calm but firm. I sat down across from her, my heart racing, but I didn't let it show. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so let's get to it," Lauren said, settling into her chair. She opened a folder in front of her, the pages rustling as she flipped through them. "What brings you here today?" I hesitated for a moment, gathering my thoughts. There was no point in pretending anymore. They had made their intentions clear, and I was done being passive. "I need to know if there's a way to remove someone from my inheritance," I said, my voice steady. "I have a son, and I'm afraid he doesn't respect me anymore. He and his wife have taken over my house, and I feel like I'm losing control. I don't want to give them anything after what they've done." Lauren didn't blink. She simply nodded, as if she had heard this before, and then leaned forward slightly. "You've come to the right place," she said. "It's not uncommon for people to feel this way, especially when family dynamics change. In your case, it sounds like a breach of trust has occurred, and that can be grounds for action." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. She was taking me seriously. This wasn't just some emotional outburst. This was real. She continued, "What you're describing is a form of legal disinheritance. You can exclude someone from your will, but there are certain conditions that need to be met. In some cases, a breach of trust or a pattern of disrespect can be enough to make that case. Of course, there are a lot of factors to consider, including your son's relationship with you and whether or not he might challenge the decision in court." I nodded, my hands clenching in my lap. "He wouldn't hesitate to challenge it," I said quietly. "But I'm done with him. Done with both of them." Lauren's eyes softened slightly, but her professionalism didn't falter. "I understand. And legally, we can prepare documents that make it clear who is entitled to your property. We'll ensure it's airtight so that no one can contest it." I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was tempered with the knowledge that this was only the beginning. I was setting something in motion that couldn't be undone. Once I took these steps, there was no going back. "But," I added, "I don't want them to just walk away with nothing. I want them to understand that there are consequences for what they've done to me. I don't just want to cut them out of my will. I want them to feel the impact." Lauren met my gaze, her expression thoughtful. "You've been wrong, Mrs. Thompson. It's clear that they've overstepped their boundaries. But be careful. Revenge can sometimes cloud judgment, and once this is set in motion, it will affect the entire family dynamic. You have to be prepared for the consequences, no matter how justified you may feel. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Be careful. For a moment, I thought about all the years I had spent being careful, trying not to rock the boat. But that's what had gotten me here. I had been careful for too long. I'm prepared, I said firmly. I just need to make sure they can't walk away without understanding what they've done. Lauren nodded, then smiled, though it was more of a professional smile than a sympathetic one. Then let's get started. We'll begin by drafting a new will and a living trust. I'll also advise you on how to make sure the house is legally protected, and we'll include a clause that ensures your son can't just come back and claim it after your passing. I felt a sense of empowerment for the first time in months. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. By the time I left the law office, the weight in my chest had lifted a little. I knew I had a long road ahead, but now, at least, I had a plan. I had done what I needed to do, and in a way, I felt more in control of my life than I had in years. The future was uncertain, but I would be ready for whatever came next. When I got back to the house, the familiar quiet greeted me. It was strange how silent it felt without Ethan and Mia's voices filling the air. But this silence was mine, and I had every intention of keeping it that way. It had been a few weeks since I visited the lawyer's office, and I hadn't made any changes yet, but everything I had planned was simmering beneath the surface, ready to boil over. I kept my emotions in check, trying to act like everything was fine, but it was becoming harder and harder. The days blurred together. They no longer asked me to join them for dinner, though I sat alone at my small table, pretending not to notice their absence. It wasn't just that they were ignoring me. They were treating me like I was invisible, as if I didn't exist in the house I had built. But the real tipping point came on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was in the garden, pruning the roses that my husband had planted years ago, the ones he had loved so much. The house felt even emptier with the weight of those memories. As I worked, I could hear Mia's voice, high-pitched and sharp, through the open window. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard enough. Her conversation with her friend on the phone was loud enough to pierce through the glass. And she barely even notices anymore. She's so old, she spends all her time in the garden, and she's too frail to care. We can't let her hold on to the house much longer. It's ours now. We just have to wait until she gives up completely. My heart sank. I wasn't imagining it. They had been planning this. I wasn't just some guest in their home anymore. I was the obstacle, the final hurdle they needed to clear in order to take everything I had worked for. The realization hit me like a slap in the face. They weren't just indifferent or disrespectful, they were calculating, deliberate in their disregard for me. Mia had spoken so casually, so confidently about what was theirs. And my son, Ethan, who I had raised, was going along with it. I stopped what I was doing and stood there in the garden, frozen. The vines of the roses I was holding drooped in my hands, their thorns digging into my skin. I could hear their words repeating in my mind. And then I realized I had been too kind, too soft. I had allowed them to make their moves because I was trying to believe that they still cared, that they still respected me. But they didn't. They had taken everything from me, my dignity, my place in my own home, my son's love. But that was going to change. I didn't want to be someone who quietly faded into the background, waiting for the inevitable. I was done letting them push me around. The time for being passive was over. That evening after dinner, I asked Ethan to meet me in the living room. I'd been calm all this time, but tonight I knew I couldn't hold back anymore. It was time for him to know what I'd been doing. He came in, his usual distracted expression on his face. Mia wasn't with him, which was a small victory in itself. At least I had him alone for this conversation. Mom, what's going on? He asked, sitting on the couch opposite me. You seem distant lately? Distant? I wasn't distant. I had been patient, but now patience had turned to resolve. I heard Mia today, I began, keeping my voice steady, though inside I was trembling. I heard what you two have been planning. His face tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might deny it, but he didn't. Instead, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. You're hearing things, Mom, he said, but his voice lacked the conviction it usually had when he lied. Mia doesn't mean anything by it. She's just stressed. We're in a difficult spot. Difficult for whom? I asked, my voice quieter but sharp. You're trying to take everything from me. You've already taken my place in my own kitchen, my spot at the table, and now you're talking about taking my house. He flinched, but there was no apology in his eyes, no remorse, just frustration. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this, he snapped. We've been living here for months, and we've been patient with you. Mia's right. You're just not the same anymore. You're old. You should be grateful we're even here. I felt the sting of his words like a slap. Grateful? Grateful for what? For him and Mia taking over my life while I stood by and let it happen? My own son didn't even see me anymore. Not as a mother, not as a person, just an inconvenience. That's it, isn't it? I said, my voice growing firmer, though the anger in me was barely contained. You and Mia think I'm just some relic, someone to be pushed aside. You've planned this from the start, haven't you? He didn't answer. His silence said it all. You think I don't see it? You've made your decision, Ethan, but I'm going to make mine now. He raised an eyebrow, clearly confused. What does that mean? I leaned forward, my gaze locked with his. It means I've already taken steps to make sure you and Mia can't take anything from me. The house isn't yours, and when I'm done, you'll have nothing left. His face twisted in disbelief. You're crazy, Mom, he said, standing up, his voice rising. You can't just change everything. Oh, but I can, I said, standing slowly as well, my voice growing colder with each word. You'll find out soon enough. As he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, I sat there, my heart pounding. I had done it. I had finally stopped being the silent, passive figure in the background of my own life. There was no turning back now. Tomorrow, I would put the plan in motion, and I wouldn't stop until I had reclaimed what was mine. The next day, I went to the bank, then to the notary's office. Every step was calculated, every move deliberate. I had waited long enough. The house that my husband and I had built, brick by brick, had been my sanctuary, my refuge, and no one, especially not Ethan and Mia, had the right to steal it from me. I had already drafted the papers, ensuring my legal rights were ironclad. There were no second chances, no escape routes for them. The house would not pass into their hands, no matter how hard they tried. The idea of a foundation to support women in my position had come to me one night, quietly, when I couldn't sleep. It was a thought born of bitterness, but also of strength. I wasn't the only one in the world who had suffered at the hands of family. There were others like me, women who had been discarded, left behind, manipulated, and forgotten. The Foundation's goal was simple but powerful, to provide a safe place for women who had been pressured or betrayed by their families, a space where they could live without fear, without judgment, and without being made to feel less than they were. It was a project I could pour my energy into, a legacy I could leave instead of being swallowed whole by Ethan's selfishness. The lawyer confirmed it. The house would now be held by the Foundation. with a specific clause added that ensured I could live there for the rest of my life. No one could touch it, no one could change it, unless I allowed it, and I had made it clear that I wouldn't. By the time I returned home that afternoon, I felt like a different woman. A woman who had taken control of her life, her future. But I wasn't naive. I knew how Ethan and Mia would react. They wouldn't go down without a fight. As soon as I entered the kitchen, I noticed it immediately. The jars, the ones Mia had thrown out weeks ago, I had brought them back. They were carefully arranged again on the windowsill, filled with spices I had picked from the garden. I smiled to myself as I unpacked the rest of my groceries and began preparing dinner. There was something calming about the simple ritual of cooking in the kitchen, surrounded by the familiar scents, the familiar objects. For a moment, I let myself forget about the anger and the betrayal. I just enjoyed the process, the chopping of vegetables, the stirring of a simmering sauce. But that peace was fleeting. Ethan and Mia came home just as I was setting the table. Ethan's face was dark with anger, Mia's eyes red, as though she had been crying. I knew what was coming. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice tight, "what the hell did you do?" I turned to face him, putting down the knife I had been holding. "I did what I had to do, Ethan. You and Mia have been plotting behind my back, thinking you could push me out. But this house is mine. I built it, and I'm not going to let you take it from me." Mia let out a frustrated sob, her eyes darting from Ethan to me, trying to make sense of it all. "This is ridiculous," she shouted. "We have nowhere else to go. You can't just do this to us." I didn't respond to her. Instead, I looked directly at Ethan, meeting his gaze with all the strength I could muster. "You thought you could just take over, didn't you?" I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You thought I wouldn't notice, but I'm not some old woman who doesn't understand what's happening around her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You don't understand, Mom," he said, his tone cold and calculating. "We need this house. We need stability. You can't just kick us out like this." "Stability?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You want stability, but you've been nothing but a storm in my life. Mia is right, I am old, but I still know how to fight for what's mine. And this house is mine, Ethan. You and your wife, you've lost the right to call it home." For a moment we stood there, the tension thick between us, neither of us willing to back down. Mia was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "You're being so cruel, Nancy," she said, her tears falling freely now. "You're pushing us away when we need you the most." My heart didn't soften. It had hardened in the years that followed my husband's death. I had learned to rely only on myself. "I'm not being cruel," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm being honest. You and Ethan have been taking advantage of me. You've tried to make me feel like I don't belong in my own home. But no more. The house isn't yours, and you need to leave." The words hung in the air, a finality to them that I could feel in my bones. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but before he could say anything, I spoke again, my tone calm but resolute. "The papers are already signed. The house is in a trust now, with a condition that I can live here for the rest of my life. No reissues, no claims. You have 30 days to vacate." Mia gasped, and Ethan's face turned pale. He stared at me, trying to process what I had just said. "You? You've already done it," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. "It's done." I nodded. "It's done." That night, I sat at the kitchen table once more, my fingers lightly brushing over the jars of spices, the same jars I had once thought I'd never see again. The house was quiet, the way it had always been when I was alone. But now, it wasn't just silence, it was peace. I had won. The following days were filled with chaos. Ethan and Mia, predictably, were not taking the news well. They attempted to reason with me, to convince me that I was making a huge mistake. But I was resolute. This wasn't a mistake. This was a long overdue reckoning. It started on the evening after they'd received the notice. I had just finished dinner, and the warmth of the oven and the smell of the food filled the air, soothing me, grounding me in the peace I'd worked so hard to reclaim. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reading through a book I had picked up recently, when I heard the front door slam open with such force that the walls seemed to tremble. "Ethan? Mia?" I called, without lifting my gaze from the pages. I could tell from their footsteps that they were storming into the house. Mia appeared first, her face flushed with anger and frustration, tears streaking down her cheeks. "How could you, Nancy?" she cried, her voice cracking. "We've been nothing but kind to you, and this is how you repay us?" I stayed seated, calm, not flinching under her gaze. "You think I've been unkind to you? You've spent the last few months making me feel invisible in my own home. You've taken over every space, every decision, and you've treated me like I don't matter." Ethan entered the kitchen then, his expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head as though I was the one who had betrayed him. "You can't just—" He stopped, his hands gripping the back of a chair as if he wanted to break something. "I don't even know who you are anymore." I set the book down and looked up at him, meeting his gaze directly. "You don't know me anymore because you never bothered to really know me. You never cared about what I wanted, only what you and Mia wanted." Mia's tears had stopped, and the anger had taken over her face. "We need this house, Nancy," she spat. "We can't just leave. Where would we go? You're being selfish. We've always been here for you. You owe us." I rose from the table, slowly, deliberately. "No, Mia," I said, my voice firm. "You owe me. You owe me the respect that you've denied me for months. You owe me the dignity of being heard in my own home, and you owe me the space to live out the rest of my life peacefully." Ethan clenched his fists at his sides. "We were going to help you, Mom," he said through gritted teeth, his voice rising. "We were going to help you, but you've made your choice. You've pushed us out." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. For a moment, the memory of the little boy I had raised, the one who had once looked up to me with admiration and love, flashed before me. He had grown into a man who would so easily turn his back on me. "I didn't push you out, Ethan," I replied, my voice softer but no less firm. "You pushed me out. You decided that I didn't matter, and now you've made your bed. You'll have to lie in it." There was a long pause. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low, almost shaking with anger. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" He turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, Mia following closely behind, their voices rising as they argued in the hallway. I took a deep breath and sat back down at the table. My heart was heavy, but it wasn't broken. It was the weight of grief, the grief of a mother who had done everything for her son and had seen him turn on her when it mattered most. I knew they wouldn't leave immediately. The next 30 days would be filled with more confrontations, more arguments. They would try every tactic to make me feel guilty, to make me doubt my decision. But I had already made up my mind. I had no intention of backing down. The thought of the house, my house, being taken from me by people I had loved so dearly, it sickened me. I couldn't allow it. The following morning, I woke to find Ethan and Mia gone. They had packed their things, or at least some of them. The house was quieter than it had been in months. I should have felt relief, but I only felt emptiness. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I recognized the number immediately. "Hello, Nancy?" The voice on the other end was that of the lawyer who had helped me with the trust documents. Yes, I replied, sitting up straighter. Is everything in order? The house is officially transferred to the foundation, as per your instructions, the lawyer said. Everything is final. I've sent the notice to your son and daughter-in-law. They've been informed about their 30-day deadline to vacate. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Thank you, I said quietly, looking out the window at the garden. Thank you for making this happen. The lawyer continued, I understand this is a difficult decision, but it's a sound one. You've done what's best for you. I smiled softly, though no one could see it. I did what was necessary. Ethan and Mia, of course, didn't leave quietly. I knew they'd fight until the last possible moment, but they were powerless to change the legal standing. The house was no longer theirs. They were no longer welcome. I spent the following weeks in a quiet, methodical process of reclaiming my space. Every corner, every shelf, every drawer in the house was mine again. The clutter Mia had left in the kitchen was gone, replaced with my familiar order. I filled the jars with herbs from my garden, just as I had done for years. The sound of the tea kettle whistling, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. It was all back. I was back. Time passed, and the house slowly returned to its natural rhythm. The quiet became a friend once more. I filled my days with the tasks I had always loved, tending to the garden, baking the cinnamon pies that Ethan and I used to enjoy together. The hum of my house, the comfort of the routine, brought me a peace I hadn't realized I was missing. Some nights, when I sat by the window, watching the lanterns flicker outside as the sun dipped behind the hills, I allowed myself to think about what I had lost. Ethan, my son, the child I had loved and raised. I wondered where he was, what he was doing, and if he ever thought of me. But those thoughts didn't last long. I had to remember the truth. He had chosen this path. He had walked away from me, and in doing so, he had closed a door I didn't know how to reopen. It wasn't just my son who was gone, though. Mia's presence in the house, too, had left a hole. She wasn't just my daughter-in-law. She had been my companion in a way. We had shared meals, laughter, even quiet afternoons. But I had been a fool to believe that any of that mattered when she had no respect for me, no understanding of what this house meant, of what I meant. It was a cold reality to face, and I mourned it in my own way. Yet there was no time to dwell too long. Life, as it always does, continued, and I had learned to live with the aftermath. A few weeks later, I received a call from a woman named Linda, who worked with the foundation where I had placed the house. She was warm and kind in her voice, a gentle contrast to the harshness that had surrounded me for months. Nancy, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you personally for everything you've done, she said. Your decision to place your house with us is helping so many women. You've given them not just shelter, but a chance to rebuild. We're all deeply grateful. I leaned against the counter, the phone pressed to my ear, and felt a small but significant tear slide down my cheek. It wasn't sadness I felt, no, it was something else entirely, something that had been buried for so long. I didn't realize I was doing something so important, I admitted softly. Linda's voice became even more tender. Nancy, you're more important to us than you realize. What you did wasn't just about the house. It was about giving women like you the right to live with dignity, to reclaim their lives when others have tried to take it away. What you've done is a lesson in courage. You've helped others believe that they, too, have the right to boundaries. The words lingered in the air, and for the first time in months, I felt a deep, undeniable sense of purpose. I had done something right. I had fought for myself, and in doing so, I had helped other women who were silently suffering, too afraid to make a stand of their own. In a strange way, I had found my voice again, and it was echoing far beyond my own front door. Days went by, and slowly I began to feel more whole. The silence no longer felt like a weight, it was mine. I had earned it. Then, one evening, as I was sitting on the back porch, sipping my tea and watching the stars emerge, I saw a car pull up in front of the house. It wasn't my son. Ethan wouldn't dare show up now. But when I saw the woman stepping out of the car, my heart skipped a beat. It was Mia. She stood there for a moment, her hand on the door handle, as though she wasn't sure if she should come in. I was frozen in place, unsure of what to do. I had spent so much time thinking about this moment, about what I would say to her when she finally came to confront me. But now, as she stood there, all I felt was an overwhelming calm. She took a deep breath and walked up the porch steps. I didn't move, not at first, not until she was standing right in front of me. I, I'm sorry, she said, her voice small. I was wrong. We were wrong. I held up my hand, stopping her. Mia, it's done. There's nothing more to say. She looked down, as though she couldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to come and apologize. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. For everything. We should have never taken advantage of you. I see that now. I stood slowly. The space between us was wide, and I wasn't sure it could ever be closed. But as I looked at her, I saw something. Regret, yes, but also the realization of what she had lost. Maybe she had always known deep down, but now it was clear. There was no going back. You can leave now, Mia, I said quietly, but thank you for saying it. She didn't protest. She just nodded and turned away, walking back to the car where she stood for a moment, lingering, as if unsure whether she should leave. I could feel the weight of her regret, and yet I didn't feel angry anymore. She was not my enemy. She was a woman who had been lost, just like I had been. The difference was, I had found my way back. She hadn't yet. I returned to my seat on the porch, looking up at the stars. For a moment, I wondered if Ethan would ever come around, if he would ever come back to me. But I quickly pushed the thought away. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken back control. The house, my house, was mine again. It was no longer a battlefield, it was my sanctuary, and in that quiet, peaceful space, I was finally free,